Presentation on what they're doing on blighted property. After that, Barry Crabb's going to bring us up to date on some financial situations. We've got some people want to talk to us this afternoon, and then we're going to go through the agenda before that. And then we have an executive session we have to get into and go back somewhere and have a little quick meeting with so the mayor is set for that. So Chris, let's go ahead with you first and get your situation behind you.
Okay.
I did. We have, we're missing one person, right? Everybody's here. Lynn's around here somewhere.
You ready, Charles?
Pruitt's on one. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So first of all, guys, housekeeping, everything behind you, you should see in front of you. So
Okay.
either place. Mike's supposed to push that to your screen, either way. Art, you may want to continue to look back. Your eyes might be getting bad. So vacant building maintenance and enforcement, that's what I wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of kind of a state of the city is where we are and have been, and lead you down into where we are going with it, okay? So first of all, we've talked about this before. We have basically 3 code enforcement tools that we use. Obviously, the most popular one, the one that you see the most, is our nuisance issues, Section 12 of Municipal Code. That prescribes the standards and abatement process to clean up grass, weed, junk, litter, trash, etc. And that obviously requires council action, and those come before you basically every 2 weeks. Also, our demolition issues, those are governed by state law, Code 1153B. Those set the standard and the abatement process to demolish unsafe structures throughout the city, and those also require council action. And then we have open and vacant or disrepair issues, either one. And through our adoption of the International Building Code, we use the International Property Maintenance Code to set the standards for securing vacant structures and levels of repair that are required for any structure in the city of Montgomery. And it includes specific language for how a property is to be properly secured. And these do not require any further council action based on the adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code. So just to go through this real quickly, 2018, we had 10,281 nuisance ordinance violations that came before our group. 5,724 of those were complied. They did not come before you. 4,557 were non-complied. So a little bit, almost 55%, 45% between an owner taking care of it himself or not after the 10-day process. And then of the 4,557 that came before you, 898 or roughly 20% were owner abated. And then we had to actually force action on 3,658, or approximately 80% of that 4,557 number. Demolitions in 2018, we demolished 115 structures around the city. 98 of those, or 85%, we actually caused to be done, whether it be by our own forces or by an abatement agent. And then 17, or approximately 15% of those were actually taken care of by the owner themselves. So open and vacant, I wanted to speak specifically about what we do when we encounter an open and vacant situation in Montgomery today. Once the determination is made that the structure is open and vacant, we can cause the structure to be secured after 20 days. That's the due process period. No further administrative action is needed by the council. The property owner, as part of his due process, has 20 days to appeal to the building official that the determination has actually been made in error. And then our practice has been to include these with our bids for nuisance violations, the grass, weeds, litter, junk, trash, and we've thrown in these properties that need to be secured, and we give these out to the abatement agents to perform this work. In 2018, we had 171 open and vacant violations that we found. 119 of those were secured by the owner just by the sending of the letter and the notification that they had 20 days to secure that structure. So 70% of those were taken care of by the owner. We affected another 52, or approximately 30%, and secured those with the abatement agents.
Hey, Chris, can I
Yes.
stop real quick on the vacant as well as the nuisance ordinance? Where is the state property involved in any of these numbers or not?
Yes, state.
Okay, so those would be the ones, those would fall under what we secured and what we abated, I guess?
Yes.
Because the state didn't do it out, so the state.
Ownership would mean nothing to us
Right, okay.
at this point. So,
So all the state properties are there and they are in the numbers that we.
the numbers that I'm giving include privately owned or those that are in state tax sale receivership by the state of Alabama.
All right, thank you.
Disrepair. Once a finding of a structure being in disrepair is made, we notify the owner, and they have 60 days to make the repair and come into minimum compliance with the IPMC. During that 60-day due process period, they also have 20 days to appeal to the chief building official that finding is in error. Since the majority of the repair cases are structures that are occupied, our practice is to first attempt to work with the owner and get them to provide us a concrete plan of action or a statement of intent. It is at that point that we would be able to gather certain information from them in terms of contact information, email, cell phone, those types of things that would be above and beyond the information that we would have. But that is our first attempt, and that's what we would hope to be able to do. But if an owner fails to respond or comply in any way with the repair order, then we would make an attempt to bring the owner before municipal court. So last year we had 195 repair violations. 101 of those, or a little over half, the owner complied with the order. We had 94 of those, a little less than half, that were not complied. Those could have been, as you mentioned, Arch, various reasons. They could have been, quote unquote, no owner. They could have been under state receivership, or they could have just chosen not to respond to our letter. We presented 19 of the 94 to municipal court for action. Of the 19 that we presented, only 5 made it into municipal court. So just a breakdown of even those 5, 3 were complied by court order following several allowances for additional time. Obviously, as I mentioned before, we'd already given them 60 days to comply. Then there's additional time to get them into municipal court, and then of course they get into court, they're given additional time even after that. And we had 3 that were complied by court order. 1 was dismissed after 3 continuances. The certificate of occupancy for the structure was revoked, and 1 was fined $250, and the defendant sold the property, and a new owner took it and completed the repairs. Yes, sir, Mr. Bell.
Chris, you said 19 was presented to the municipal court, and the municipal court only heard 5. Can you explain if it was presented, and I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of the judge, why would only 5 be heard?
Right, so I don't know that I would be speaking on behalf of the judge, but the subpoena to appear in court has to be presented to the person. And so I believe there are issues with being able to do that. The reason there are only 19 out of 94, because to my understanding, we have a hard time getting those presented to people who reside in the city of Montgomery. They do not, as a practice, go outside of the city of Montgomery. So certainly if they were out of city or out of county, or certainly out of state, we would be unable to serve any notice to appear in court. So of the 19, those would have been ones that we would feel like they could be served. My assumption would be that only 5 were served, but again, once it goes past me into presenting it for the subpoena, then that is more or less out of our hands in terms of being able to do anything.
Okay.
Okay?
So, Mr. Conway, you're saying that if the owner is out of state, the city then accepts the premise that the city is unable to serve?
Again,
subpoena of the
he
papers?
mentioned it before, but I don't really feel like I will be speaking for municipal court and how they would do their process. So I don't know if that would be the case, but yeah, I think that would be my understanding of accepting the premise that we would not be able to get them into municipal court.
But let me follow up and ask this question, though. Assuming that we can't get to them for whatever reason out of state, what would we do with the properties that are in the disrepair and we can't get to the owner? What would we do? We, the city, do?
What,
Leave it vacant or
well, no, these aren't vacant necessarily.
not in disrepair, though?
Right, and again, these are standards of disrepair. We would have to go through a process to determine if it was worthy of presenting to municipal court. Some of these are, the fascia board could be rotting on your house. I mean, when I say disrepair, I don't want you to get the idea that these are ones that would be on the list for demolition. That's not what this is. This is, you're just not generally taking care of your property, and it just doesn't look as good as the ones in your neighborhood. You are there, people don't like it, but you may be a tenant and you may have an out-of-state landlord, whatever the case may be, but it may just need painting, it may need a railing on the front porch. There are, it goes from 0 to 100 in terms of the severity of the disrepair.
But the question is, what would you do with that person if they're out of state?
What would we do?
Yeah.
Well, we've notified them that they need to bring it into a state of repair.
Do we repair it?
As
We
a
can't get
general
them-
rule, if I go back, since the majority of those cases are structures that are occupied, we would not go and affect that repair for them. Not to say that we couldn't, but generally we do not.
So it goes unrepaired?
Yes.
So you wasted our time? Yeah, we did the work, but we
50
didn't get
well,
anything out of it.
Well, we gave it our best shot on 195 of them. We got 101 of them done. So
I'm saying that
I don't know if that's a complete
there's
waste of
some people
time
that get
because
it
I
right.
can't pick and choose which one's a waste of time and which one's worthy
No,
of my
no,
time.
My point is this: if we got to be able to get the guy that owns the property, and if he's not there to do it, we've got the address. We know where who owns the property, but you have no way to really fine him other than repairing the property and giving him an administrative fee. Is that correct?
That is correct. So again, I want to couch this as this is what we have been doing.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what we did up until today. Okay,
Right.
so let's. I'll continue on, but essentially, yes, this is the state of where we were in dealing with properties. So, when you're talking about the magnitude of 10,000 nuisance violations, this is a small percentage of structures that are in disrepair. So the road, yes.
Sorry, Roy. Do you have a percentage of state properties? Did you break it down? Because I know we're not collecting any revenue for the state properties, even though they do comprise a large percentage of what we do. Do you have that broken?
Let me do this. Let me just continue, and perhaps I will answer your question or be able to address that as we continue on with this presentation. So let's take the road down to what I call data-driven distress management in the city of Montgomery. So Montgomery has been tabbed as a smart city, and the mayor has often asked, or he has either been asked, what does that mean? Right, Mayor?
Absolutely.
So to be smart, you need two things. One, you need information or intelligence, and two, you need the ability to apply that intelligence to craft practical solutions. You don't become smart overnight, and you don't really ever get there. It is a continual process, and obviously we've declared ourselves a smart city, and we certainly are smarter than we've ever been, but we are not at the end of that process, but we are certainly well down that road. So how did we continue down this road of data-driven distress management? Well, the first thing the council frankly realized, and we realized as well, is that we needed more resources to be able to do more. So we began by maximizing the use of current tools. We received additional funding from the council in fiscal 2017, and we decided that that would be best spent concentrating on unsafe residential structures and continuing down the path of demolishing those unsafe structures in our residential areas. Second thing is we knew we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. Montgomery, obviously not the first city in America to experience distress. We commissioned and published a study of current best practices nationwide and evaluated the state of various issues that were very specific to the city of Montgomery. We did that in the middle of 2017. Mayor taught me a great phrase: everyone's job is essentially no one's job. So we can't assign something to everyone and expect one person to do it, because everybody's going to expect that everybody else is taking care of it. So we assigned the job of distressed property issues to one person. Thomas Carr was named kind of the blight czar, I'll call him, and we established a blight division within our inspections department with a specific focus on distressed property, and we did that in 2018. And the first thing he did was conduct a data audit to determine what information we need to target the various blight issues. And we found out two things. One, that we needed a lot of information, but we also found out that we basically already had most of it available to us. We had tons of data from a lot of different sources, internal, external. We had property registration from the data, property registration data from the county. Our capture system ties county property data, which is essentially the clearinghouse for all property ownership data in the county. Is set up to be that way statewide. They are the clearinghouse for property ownership information. That's where you go to register your property. Building permits, housing code enforcement, planning and zoning all need this property data. They all need our data as well. And we have been real-time communicating with them since 2013. Our Q Alert 311 work request system, our open data portal, our business license system, crime stats, fire and rescue data, being able to know when a house burns down and it's in need of emergency demolition, those sorts of things that someone might not necessarily think would tie together. Our GIS data, census data, socioeconomic data, utility data, waterworks, Alabama Power, etc. That's a lot of data, and it's all available to us, and we knew that we needed most of it. So how can you analyze all of this data at once? They're all on different systems, different platforms, it could take forever seemingly. It's just a monumental task to take over. But there was something available to us, an application program interface, or API, that would allow us to analyze different data sets, and we felt like this would be our best bet to get down the road of analyzing that data. And essentially, again, an application program interface is something that allows multiple software programs to communicate back and forth with each other. That's all that is. Just a visual representation of that. If you look to the left, that's all the different types of data that I mentioned: code enforcement, building permit, utility, county property. That's all fed into the data collector, and then that can be fed out to neighborhood services, distressed property management, planning and development, community policing. Really, the uses are almost endless, because not everybody needs every bit of this data, but almost everybody needs some part of it. So let's go to a live demonstration of this Ptolemy API software. And I say live, it's not technically live, but it was taped before a live studio audience. How might we begin to identify vacant structures in Montgomery? This is the example that I would use, and really why we went with Ptolemy. This was our main goal, and so this is what it had to be able to do for me and for Thomas and Jerry Russell and Savio to be able to say that we'll take it. So first of all, let's start with the property registry of every parcel in the city. Pay attention to the number at the bottom as we kind of move through this live demonstration. So when I first pull this up, I say I want to see every property in the city of Montgomery. That bottom number tells me there are 83,244 properties registered within the city of Montgomery. So to narrow that down, if you'll look, I selected a filter and I said, well, really, I'm only concerned with those that have a structure on it. I click those that have a structure and the green dots disappear. I'm left with the yellow dots, and that leaves me with 71,288 properties in Montgomery that actually have a structure on it. So we're talking about vacant properties. We're kind of in the mind of residential properties. So let's just look at those in Montgomery that are zoned residential. Okay, so I've got 71,288 structures. Boom, I'm down to 63,018 that have a structure and are zoned residential. But that's still a big number. What else do we need to identify to get down to, quote, a vacant structure? To narrow that down, let's look at those that are not owner-occupied. So if you'll look, I've got basically the yes or no. Is it owner-occupied or not? Does it have a homestead exemption? We will assume, for the sake of this demonstration, that those that have a homestead exemption are being occupied by the owner. Those that are not are potentially vacant and or rental. So that we're down to 20,185 properties that are not owner-occupied in Montgomery. Let's narrow it down a little bit further because we don't know for sure if these are vacant. So to narrow it down a little bit further, look for property that does not have an active sanitation account. Okay? Of the 20,185 potentially vacant properties, I'm down to 5,057 of those 20,000 that do not have an active sanitation account. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not still occupied, but let me do one more utility search and say, let's look for those that do not have an active power account. So they don't have an active sanitation account and they don't have an active power account. And I've got 5,000 properties that I'm worried about. 2,115 properties now have been identified in the city of Montgomery that we would say are potentially vacant properties in the city of Montgomery. On each of these properties, I know the owner, I know any of the information from any of those databases that would tie to a piece of property, I would know that information. So with that 2,115, and maybe this is where I was saying I could help answer your question, Mr. Green, we can further subdivide this into state-owned versus privately owned. We can do this district by district. We can even do it neighborhood by neighborhood. So we can take that 2,115 and further subdivide that into any metric that we want to try and look at. Yes, ma'am?
Now, would you be able to maybe connect with 311 and see how many of them have had calls of, like, you know, blight on the property so that you
Absolutely.
know? Okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yes, we would know the nuisance history of every parcel. We would know the 311 history of every parcel. We would know all of that information and be able to further go look at that. Now, what we would plan to do with something like this is our plan of action would be to create what I would call a vacant property registry. Okay? So I have 2,115 potentially vacant properties, but I don't know that. I just know that the data has dialed me down to, you need to look at these very closely. So this is something we can do that will be very manageable to us in our inspections department, and we'll be able to go out and ground truth that information and essentially create a vacant property registry as we go out and look. And as we're going out and looking, we're looking at the condition of the property. We're looking at everything else that's involved with it. And of course, we know some of the first ones we need to look at because those will be the ones that have a nuisance history, those that have a 311 call for service, those types of things. So, and just to demonstrate this a little bit further, I'll kind of go through each person's district and you can see what you got looking district by district. Council District 1, Richard, you got 31 properties, so you can probably take care of that this afternoon. District 2, 194 properties. District 3, 608 properties. And again, you notice it's showing you exactly on the map where these are, and we can start to look neighborhood by neighborhood where these things are taking place and where we need to concentrate our efforts. District 4 has 519. District 5 has 175. District 6 has 82. District 7's back up to 486. District 8 has 13. You're doing a great job,
Does that mean
Glenn.
I'm doing the best job
You're doing the
sitting up
best
here?
job on the council so far.
Thank you, Mr. Conway.
And only one street's be paved.
You personally take care of
And it also shows you don't have any streets that need to be paved, Glenn. So,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
so you are doing the best job of anybody there. And then, well, I'm sorry, you're number 2. So Charles Jenwright, you only have 7 properties.
I demand.
But anyway, so I say all that to demonstrate to the council that not only do we have tools available to us with institutional control in terms of the nuisance ordinance, in terms of the property maintenance code that sets the standard for how every property should be properly maintained, that it should be secured.
Excuse me.
But also that we're able to dial it down to a level and come up with an internal registry of property that we can manage and deal with on a case-by-case basis. So I think we're better off than we've ever been. And like I said, we don't become smart in one day, but I think we are well down that road to getting smarter and smarter and making better use of our resources. So again, if you have specific questions like Mr. Green and you want to see any of this, we can sit down and come up with all types of reports and, you know, that sort of thing for your district in particular.
You can pull it up by state, by the state property. Could you pull it up at all the state property?
Absolutely.
You can pull it
Yes,
up,
sir.
that's
Yeah, because what I'm interested in is all of the property that's owned by the state that we know we're going to have to take care of anyway, and then what that would look like in terms of if the city just went out and cut them ahead of time, what that would mean in terms of dollars, because you know there is a money side to it. It would be nice if we could just cut them once a month, but if we're going to do that and send it out to the people that are going to pay, we got to pay.
Right. And as a result of having this type of data available to us, those are particularly the conversations that we are having in our blight department. And we're saying there's really no need to put a notice in the yard. There's really no need to notify the state that we're going to come cut it. But we do need some systematic way to have that done. It's not just a matter of, well, let's just go cut it when it doesn't need cutting.
Yeah.
But we definitely want to cut it if it does.
Yeah.
And so some systematic way, I don't know if 4 weeks is the right number. I don't know if 6 weeks is the right number. And essentially, I think you've mentioned it before, it could be on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. They may think 2 weeks is not good enough, you know, but if they want to, you know, if there's a way for you to give discretionary money to a particular neighborhood and they can take care of 10 state-owned properties within their neighborhood with that money, they can do it every week if they want to.
Yeah, because some, like, Jenwright, of course, only had 7 properties. You can cut that himself, but for,
But now what he had was 7 potentially vacant properties. That doesn't mean he doesn't have potentially problematic properties.
yeah, but we only talking about state properties that we know for a fact, it's going back to the state, it's taxed. We're talking about those kinds.
No,
Maybe
I
somebody-
understand.
You abate those like you normally abate those. But
Right.
for those properties, we know that if nobody reports it, because there are properties in
Right, because I would go all the way back to the first screen, and I would be worried about those that both had a structure and did not have a structure, as it deals with
Mr.
state-owned.
Conway, could you take the list that you have in there on state-owned properties and give us an estimate of what it would cost annually to put in the budget to take care of, clean those properties up, let the city take care of it? Could you give us that number
Yeah.
at some time future, not now, but?
Well, to help me out, I would need to know from somebody what frequency they wanted.
Well, you'd have
and
to
what-
estimate that yourself, you know,
Yeah,
we don't
break it
know.
down.
Yeah, 4
You can break it
weeks.
down by 2 weeks, a month, whatever it would look like, 2 months. And then that way you present both those numbers, whichever is manageable.
Mr. President,
I'm gonna hold my hand up for the law.
Mr. Bell, you
Bell.
got something?
Speak up, Mr. Bell.
All right.
Speak up.
Bell.
I believe in getting permission. Hey,
Mr. Bell, yes, sir.
I'm Baptist. Yeah, all is in order. I think I'm not questioning the data or anything like that, but one of the things I'm concerned with, we got an ordinance coming, well, we got to vote on it. And what I'm concerned with, not so much the abatements for grass cutting and stuff like that, but for the, you can do the abatement for the grass and all that, but for the unoccupied structures that may be in, and I want to use dilapidated because just continuous unoccupied structures, would this be in that 21,000, what was it, in that?
2,000.
That 2,000, all that would be in that 2,000, those unoccupied structures?
Yeah, the 2,115 was what I would call our best guess at vacant structures within the city of Montgomery.
And does me one, so if we're having problem with, you said registration, we are registering those owners. We know who those owners are.
Exactly.
What, right, the count, that you're required to register every piece of property with the county today. So that's what we base our information on, is the property data that they provide.
Okay, so with those unoccupied houses that maybe y'all couldn't do the subpoenas on, but we know the owners, so I'm at all as to why someone would not know where to send the subpoena to. But let me ask you this: do we have registered agents for them? I mean, can't we just do like they do with an LLC? So everybody who has a piece of property they're renting, they have to have a registered agent. Instead of trying to go find the owner, we serve the registered agent. Because if you own an LLC or any kind of corporation, you have to have a agent. So would that be out of? I think that may be. Am I over my head, Kim? No, you got to have a registered agent in the state of Alabama.
I'm not sure what the maintenance code says, Counselor, but I mean, like in the abatement process, the code requires to serve the property owner.
Of record.
Of record, right. So,
but what I'm saying, and not to cut you off, what I'm saying, if someone is making some money, and we're not talking about Aunt Sally, who's 95 years old, renting to her grandson, but if someone is in the business of leasing houses and renting houses, they're in the business of doing business.
right.
And so what would it be unconstitutional, would it be within our purview to say, if you're going to do business in the city of Montgomery, we make everybody else have a license. I don't make any money being a lawyer, y'all. Y'all make me get a license. I register, you know. What I'm saying is, why can't we have, for every piece of property that's being rented, a person to designate a registered agent here in the state of Alabama? So we don't have to worry about if he lives in California, if he lives in Ethiopia or Timbuktu, anywhere. We know that we're going to serve a subpoena on him, and then whether he answers or not, then we can take the necessary action. So am I?
No, and I don't know that there's a downside from serving everybody we can get contact info on. I just don't, I don't know if,
But if they don't answer,
I don't know
what
if
I'm
it's a
saying is,
municipal court
yeah. But if they don't
process
answer the
issue.
subpoena, I mean, how do you know if you can't serve somebody in California with a
No, I
subpoena?
know that. I
Yeah.
know, but I'm just saying, giving notice and trying to bring them in, I don't know that there's a downside to trying to bring in whoever we can.
Yeah.
And I think our license, our business license, has contact info on it, a requirement.
Yeah.
Huh? Right? So, I mean, one thing we've kind of talked about with the business licenses and the rental stuff is we should be able to have some kind of contact info on the application for the rental properties, which would include that.
That's right, and I believe we owed y'all an update at this work session anyway, so maybe a good lead-in. And
Go ahead and tell us.
Pardon?
You can go ahead and tell us now.
Yeah. We are looking at the changes. Councilman Larkin asked us to look into what needs to be done to start requiring residential landlords to have a license. So we think within the next couple of meetings, we should be able to have an ordinance that we want that limits the city's liability, because we're not going to require inspections on the front end. Although we do have the right to do them, we don't have the obligation to do an inspection or have fire sign off on a business license like they typically would. and we're working with Niderco, our vendor that maintains our business license software. There's a few changes that need to be made on the residential license. It's business license season all over Alabama, so that's their priority right now in January, February. We're into March. We think within the next 30, 45 days, we can have that change in place and be prepared to move forward. Come up with a plan, because we don't want to just drop the hammer and say, okay, everybody's required now. We want to come out with some, an educational process, let everybody know this is going to be coming, and get a time frame that we're all happy with.
Which is going to be more applicable to the units that are four
private,
the quads or less. I think
right.
we're already in place with all the others. So to answer your question, I would hope that some of the vacant properties might pick up some of that just through some of the licensing.
That's right.
I don't know. But that's one of the things we were looking at trying to do with the smaller units, which it seems like the single-family dwellings have been a problem, trying to get the info on those. So that's something that would go into effect for the quadruplex down to the single-family dwellings that are being registered.
Mr. President.
Is there any way?
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
But to Mr. Bell's point of not having a registry that deals with absentee owners who live out of state, and not having a mechanism available to us to require them to register with the city, a local management agent who would be responsible for the management of that property in the absence of the actual owner of the property. And that is why we need the vacant building ordinance, because in Section 4 of that ordinance, this proposed ordinance, it requires, as a part of the vacant building registration certificate, the identification of a local management agent for any property for an owner who lives out of state and who cannot be reached and who cannot be subpoenaed. The local agent would be subject to be subpoenaed.
Okay.
Question.
No, it's
Yeah.
not. I mean,
Brandon?
And that would be a
I don't know
Lines?
that it's on.
I mean, if we can't get in touch with the owner or force them to comply with maintaining the structure, how you gonna force them
Put your
to?
microphone up, Mr. Lund.
If you can't force them to comply with maintaining the structure or whatever, how you gonna make them do that?
Because it's the law. And they would be in violation of the law if they did not do it.
But are they already in violation of an existing ordinance?
They are in violation of many existing ordinances.
I'm just trying to figure out what's a hammer. It doesn't seem like that hammer's any heavier than the hammer we already have.
Well, this hammer.
Councilman Larkin, let me just
you're
address
saying
what
don't
you
have-
just
You're saying
mentioned.
you don't have a hammer.
Let me
And I'm
just-
saying
let me
that
just
this
address
ordinance
what-
provides us with a hammer that says that absentee owners must identify a local agent who is responsible for that property in the absence of the owner.
Yeah, what I would respond to that is, with the process that we've identified here and the ability to more or less identify the vacant properties that are in Montgomery and create that registry, it would be on us to go and find that information out, and we would create that registry, whether there was a law in place or there was not. That is our intention with the use of this software. So we would be gathering that information as we could. As Brantley pointed out, they're already in violation of several things that we are unable to prosecute them with. And so to say that if we say you now have to provide me with a local owner, I don't know when that local owner changes, when the ownership changes at the county, because that's the clearinghouse for where ownership changes are kept. That's where LLCs change hands, and it goes from one LLC to another LLC to an INC to a whoever. And that's what we have to rely upon, and those changes would not be able to be tracked on our system in any way, shape, or form. Phone numbers change, email addresses change, all those, we can't even keep track of that on an application for employment. When we go and try to find somebody's phone number, they've changed the number, their cell phone's disconnected, all those sorts of things. So I don't think there's any, it's not going to give us any better tool, if I could say that, that would allow us to do any better of a job. But our intention is to use what we're able to do with this software to create that registry and get those types of information so that we can
The
better.
new software gives you ability to do things you couldn't do last year.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Question. Will the new software provide us the ability to go in and search for all properties, vacant or otherwise, that are owned by people that do not have a Montgomery address?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we can automatically go in and identify those. Also, another question. Even though this it tracks the data, can we then click a button and say generate these form letters or whatever? Can you do that? Can you go in and generate form letters out of this, like notifications that need to be sent out? Is there any way to do that?
Yeah,
Also,
well, actually, our capture system does that today, when we have a violation of some sort. And so that's how we track all of that. Because again, everything has to be kept up with from start to finish or this data is useless.
okay, so what I'm saying is, what if we come up with a new kind of category and we want to segment the data, and you can go in and mine the data here, and then we say, okay, send out a form letter to these people. Does that have that, or do you have to extract that data to another system, say an Excel or spreadsheet, and then import it to another system?
Right. So I think what I'm trying to say today is that in 2018, when we found 171 open and vacant cases or 195 disrepair cases, a lot of those were reactive. A lot of those were just, we caught it because we were near something else that was a problem. And so we don't really have any confidence that that I could stand here before you and say that we caught every single one of the open and vacant cases or the disrepair cases that are out there. But what I do say to you with confidence today is that if I know that there's 2,115 potentially vacant properties, that in a matter of a few short months, I will have a very good idea as to how many of those are open and vacant, how many of those are in disrepair, what kind of strategies do we need to employ, whether it be the things you mentioned with grass cutting or those sorts of things, whether it be that we do put some money towards making repairs on these structures. We've been in a heavy demolition phase. I mean, we had 435 structures that needed to come down that were unsafe, that were a blight on everybody in this city. 435 are on their way to being down, and as those numbers diminish to the ones that are a much smaller number out there that are unsafe, now we're into those that need repair. Now we're into those that just need to be secured. And making sure that vagrancy isn't taking place or illicit activity isn't taking place or those sorts of things. But as we look at these, we'll be our checklist will include, is there evidence of vagrancy? Is there evidence of illicit activity? Is there evidence of these sorts of things? And that information is obviously going to be available to MPD. Just as our their crime stat data is available to me to add to, is it a nuisance? Is it a this? Is it a that? We will be feeding that information to them as well, so it goes both ways. Okay. And so I think it's going to be a very powerful tool.
Stop at this point. We can talk all afternoon long about this stuff. Quick question. One last question.
Based off this data, it sounds like you have a plan going forward. So now we presented with the data. Is there any way you can come back to us and say, okay, based off this data, here's our plan for the next few months, and here's what we're going to do in order to tackle the vacant.
Mr. Green, would you speak into your mic, because you're not being
Sorry
picked
about
up by the cable people.
What I was saying was, based off the data, and it sounds like you have a plan. Is there any way you can get that plan to us? Either you can email it to us, or you can probably do another presentation in terms of, here's how you're going to tackle this using this data. Here's what we're going to do in the next few months to address this issue.
How about this? What I intend to do with each one of these properties that we've identified is that we're going to hold them to the standards that are set forth in this city, whether it be nuisance, whether it be International Property Maintenance Code, or whether it be State Statute 1153B. And at the end of a couple of months, I plan to present what we have done, not what we plan to do.
Okay, great.
Okay?
Okay, I need to stop at this point. We've got a lot more to cover. I think we talked about this. If you have more questions of Chris and his departments, contact him personally and look at what he's doing, because I think they're heading in the right direction.
Right. The offer still stands for each of you to come and take
see
a look at it individually so that you can kind of see how it affects you and how you want to use it. So
We all
we're
address this
available.
big problem. Okay, I need to get Barry's already made his comments, and let's get into the agenda right quick like. The first item on the agenda is a real good example of the problem. And I think she's gonna come and talk to us at the work session, at the regular meeting. But if you've seen that piece of property, I don't think there's hardly anything in that whole neighborhood that doesn't need to come down in some way. It's an awful piece of property. All right, second one, we've already discussed this quite often, quite a bit. Let's go, let me go on down to the agenda, we'll come back to number two.
Actually, I would like to discuss, I'm sure.
Yes.
All right, we'll go ahead to number two.
Instead of just skipping.
Well, let's go ahead and get it done.
Go ahead.
Because I need to get through the agenda. Go ahead, number two. Number two was,
Tracy's on.
Larkin, you want to comment on this?
I was just going to ask a question as to why we were skipping it.
Because just a lot of time, I'm trying to get, I've got to get a executive session worked into our time of 45 minutes, okay? Go
Yes,
ahead.
Is there anything, is there a discussion with regard to any changes or amendments that would be offered to the ordinance?
Now, the particular piece in terms of capturing the data seems like that the new system would actually give us a little bit more data, and that's what we were asking for before. So the part of the ordinance where there's a registry, in other words, requiring the user to actually sign up, I don't think that part is probably needed, so you might want to maybe change that. But I do agree with you that maybe we need to look at, and I think Councilman Bell brought it up, or Brantley Lyons brought it up in terms that how do we get people to comply? So I think that particular piece of it where you have increased fees, that's something that we might want to revisit in terms of how do we apply that, and maybe we need an ordinance for that. But I think the piece where registry in terms of number two is concerned, we might not need that, so we might want to table it, and then you make some adjustments, and then we can look at it later, as opposed to going forward as is today to require a registry when the new system probably has as much data as we need at this particular point.
I would agree. I think it's all well and good that we have the system that supplies the data. I think that was fundamental to the success of the program to begin with. In order to go forward with implementing a program like this, there would have to be a reliable identification system as a part of that process. I do not believe that because we have technology, it has been demonstrated to us that there is technology available to us that would identify these properties, does not obviate the need for the enactment of the ordinance, which would require any individual who has a vacant property to make that fact known to the city of Montgomery. Whether the city has been able to determine it without the reporting of it, I don't see any problem with requiring the owner to register the property if the property has not already been identified.
Yeah, and I think the piece to which I'm referring, though, I think that's needed is the, I guess, requirement if your property is abated, that you should provide a maintenance plan going forward. In other words, if we abate your property this month, do you have any intention to actually take care of that property next month? In other words, will this be a recurring issue? So I think that particular piece I think you put in there is something that I think is needed. But in terms of the data, I hadn't got there and looked at all the data elements yet, and I'm sure that's beyond this scope of this presentation. But I would like to go in and look at all the data elements that are available. For example, phone number, and maybe there's an email address, or some of those type of things that we can probably use to speed up the correspondence. So before we move forward with this to put an additional burden on the citizens in terms of that they have to fill out another form, that particular piece, I say we might want to table. But the other piece that you have, which is the fees, and maybe to present a maintenance plan, I think that might be necessary. So what I'm saying is, instead of voting on it as it is today, maybe we can, table it once again, make some changes, take those pieces out for the data elements until we can confirm whether or not we already captured that, and then we can probably move forward with the additional, the other things with the fees and the maintenance plan in your ordinance. Because I think it's needed, but the data part of it is maybe that might change based off the new system that we have.
Well, the data part of it was going to be part and parcel of it anyway. I mean, there's no way to have a program without the data and the technology to be able to identify the properties if people choose not to register them. I don't think it eliminates the need for the ordinance, or for that section of the ordinance.
Anybody else got
Okay, I mean, I just wanted to
Okay,
state
go ahead.
that, but I do think that maybe, for me, I would need to basically look at the data elements, and maybe you can say what we would require them to provide us if we already got it, because the detail of it is not in your ordinance in terms of this is what it would look like and this is what we would need them to provide. I would have to look and see if we already got that information. with the new
No, but the
system.
detail is there, Mr. Green, as to what they would be required to provide to the city. In addition to what Mr. Bell referred to earlier, they would be required to provide to the city the name of any local registered agent or management company that is authorized by the owners of the property to conduct business affairs directly related to that property.
So that's for out-of-state properties only, right? Not people that actually
No,
live in Montgomery.
yes, well, that would be relevant to those individuals who are out of state and who have local registered agents who are authorized to manage the business affairs of the property.
Okay, like I said, I just don't want to make sure we have a duplication of duty and then put undue burden on the people that basically do the same thing or provide information that we already have.
Well, if we already have it, it wouldn't be no need for them to produce it if it's already of
I
record.
think the reality today, we just saw that we now have it. We didn't have it last year. We got it now.
I think what would have been good.
Well, we've always had county property records. We've always
Well,
had
you
the
got combined
Alabama
now.
State
You got it
Department
all
of Revenue
combined.
property records. We've always had property records available to
Well,
us.
you got it combined
That is,
into one
that is
computer
nothing
program.
new.
Yeah, and I think
Only
he's
we've had that
correct. Some
API
of the issues been with the
Yeah,
county records
the
is that
API system, wonderful new platform, but it does not eliminate the need for the enforcement of an ordinance.
My biggest concern, though,
Yes.
is if they're already in violation of 2 or 3 ordinances not maintaining their property, and we have that on the books, I mean, let's say they don't do what it says, and you're gonna send them fines, and they don't pay the fines, what's the ultimate enforcement mechanism in that ordinance? That you're gonna tie them down and make them do what they're supposed to do, when they're already out of compliance with 2 or 3 other ordinances?
I mean, I
jail
don't see,
time
I
or
don't,
something
I don't
like that,
see,
so you gotta go
I don't
with
see
this
how
stuff.
you differentiate that from any other law that people choose to not obey. There are penalties for not obeying laws, and you apply the penalties when they don't obey the law.
So do you fine them and fine them and fine them, and if you don't collect the fine, what's the ultimate thing? You take the property, you do the work for them, and put it on the tax bill, and you never collect it like we do on the other ones, or? So I'm just concerned about duplicity.
Sometimes a little duplicity is not a bad thing.
Yeah, probably.
Particularly when we have such egregious violations of our
30 seconds.
maintenance
All right.
laws.
I think we've discussed it enough now. Let's move on to the next item. I think we're all headed up. Item number 3 is,
there does-
the only person we have appointed that's going to the League of Municipality Convention is Audrey. And we'd like to let her be our designee as a voting delegate. Anybody else want to go?
No.
What are they gonna call it?
I'm sorry, what was the question, Mr. President?
City
Question was number 3. The city does pay if you go down there.
Oh, really? So we relook at this.
But at this point, Audrey's the only one that's said she wanted to go. And
Where is it, Mr. Jenright?
It's in Mobile.
Mr. Bell, does that matter?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to go south.
Las Vegas. Is it Las Vegas?
Okay. At this point, we do that. Then you got number 4, 5, 6 are all liquor license. We'll see those when they come for us this afternoon. Number 7 and number 8 are 2 persons being reappointed to the Montgomery Educational Building Authority, which is actually a building authority for St. James School. They're doing some expanding at St. James School, and this authority helps them with their financing. No obligation to the city. It's just a situation under law that they can get a preferred financing agreement because of their position as an education institution. And number 9, number 7, 8 there. Number 9 is the tear downs. Number 10 and 11 are abatements, and we'll discuss those in the meeting. And then after that, I have 3 people want to talk to us. Trey Knight from the Family Sunshine Center. Trey?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me? Okay, my name is Tay Knight. I'm the Executive Director of the Family Sunshine Center. Our agency provides hope, healing, advocacy, empowerment, and education to those individuals who are suffering from domestic violence and sexual assault. I will pass out a snapshot of what's gone on in our agency for the last fiscal year, but I just wanted to provide you with an update. Although we don't track specific cities because of confidentiality and security reasons, I can tell you that in Montgomery County, we fielded 1,169 crisis calls, provided 6,067 days of shelter service for 203 women and children, and provided counseling to 510 clients. We also provided services to 36 clients exiting our residential programs with permanent housing searches, employment assistance, life skills training, and resource identification. So the primary mission of the Family Sunshine Center has been domestic violence and sexual assault for many, many years. And within the last year, we have begun to actively collaborate with task forces and law enforcement agencies around the problem of human trafficking. Recognizing that victims of this crime need the same types of services that have been available in our community for domestic violence and sexual assault victims, our board of directors earlier in 2007 voted to adopt this as part of our ongoing mission. And this would include both labor trafficking and sex trafficking. I realize that in our community we may have some myths and some naysayers about the actuality of human trafficking, and we'll have to overcome those as we initiate services. One of the first ones is it doesn't happen here, but maps with the National Human Trafficking Alliance called Polaris shows that it happens in many cities around Alabama. The second myth is that victims are abducted. In most cases, they're not abducted. They're actually recruited into this network. A third myth is that it has to be a large network for it to be considered human trafficking, and that's not actually the case. A family, a gang, or a street family can actually traffic an individual. And then the fourth one is that traffickers are easily recognizable, and we just know that that's not true. So what does trafficking actually look like? A couple of headlines that you may or may not have seen. Former Gunnersville soccer coach gets 30 years on human trafficking charges. The woman gets 15 years. An Alabama grandmother is charged with forcing her 13-year-old granddaughter into sexual servitude. And the murder of a Prattville resident led Alabama investigators to a center of a Montgomery human trafficking ring. That was probably the most recent in January of this year. So I absolutely, in this mission, want law enforcement to get a prosecution for these crimes, but for me, it's just as important for the victims to get the long-term services that they need to be survivors. Over the next few months, the Family Sunshine Center will work to identify a location, assess safety needs and space functionality, equip the space for residential services, staff the site, and open the doors to a shelter equipped to provide safe housing and provide crisis intervention, counseling, emotional support, advocacy, and consultation services for victims of human trafficking. Today, I'm really here to ask you to consider if you have any discretionary funds that are available, that you would consider allocating those to the Family Sunshine Center. We have applied for several federal grants ranging about a total of $1 million, and we will need matching funds in order to ensure financial feasibility.
We're funding already, what, 25,000?
40,000.
40,000?
In the operating budget.
Yes, sir.
We receive CDBG funds.
Yes, what I thought, yeah, okay. Very good, Trey. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll leave
You do a good
this
job.
information.
Any of you ever served on board, this quite a job there.
Mm-hmm.
We'll keep the existing, but get another one.
Okay, Bill Glard.
Yes,
You here,
that's
Bill?
correct.
Thank you. Remind you, 3 minutes. We're going to try to move this meeting on through.
Thank you, sir.
It won't take long.
I don't think I'll even need 3 minutes. I just want to show you the great privilege I had today. A whole hour with Joe Bradley, who's at his last day at Jeff Davis High School today. this is what I shared with him. And we believe that these words are going to make a difference with him. Well, I'm excited about the opportunity of motivating young people to think big. That's what it's all about. As a matter of fact, all of us need to think big. Everyone in this room. Now, the other reason I'm here is because right now, as we speak, the marching band of Jeff Davis High School is in Mobile and playing in the Mardi Gras. And this past weekend, they played in another Mardi Gras, I forgot what city it was. So this is 2 within 1 week. They just wanted me to remind you of the fact that soon, very soon this month, they will be traveling to New York City, and each time they've played in the Mardi Gras, they've made about $4,000. So they're doing all that they can to raise funds, and yet they are still about $6,000 short. And I told them that I would deliver that message for them, so that if any one of you have not contributed to them going to New York City, not to represent one side of the city, but the entire city of Montgomery, just remember them, they need another $6,000.
Well, Bill, I was going to contribute to you, so what I'll do is just take the funds that I was going to contribute to you and give to Jeff Davis. Would that be okay?
Praise the Lord.
All right.
All right, Irvin Holloway.
And that's the Jeff Davis Band, right?
Praise the Lord.
Irvin Holloway.
That's the Jeff Davis Band, right?
Yeah, I said Jeff Davis.
Peace and blessings, City Councilman.
Yes, sir.
I'm here on behalf of Torian Hamilton. As you know, she has been
Giving Tory some.
suicide prevention.
Thank you, sir.
What's up? How you doing?
Thanks, sir.
She the first person who gave me a platform when I came home back to Montgomery 17 years ago, and as a motivation speaker and public speaker. And she just wanted to present that information to the City Council and to forward her mission, because there's been a lot of things been going on in Montgomery. And I hate to have to come up before you all based on violence and stuff, and I hope that somehow I can come to you based on a cheer of good news. And she just wanted to present that platform to you all. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. The mayor's asked us to go in executive session. I'd like to adjourn this meeting for a business expansion. We're looking at Montgomery. So I'd like to adjourn this meeting back to the council.
Need a motion.
Huh?
Need a motion.
Motion to go in executive session.
Okay, all in
This
favor?
is for business expansion.
Business expansion.
Mrs. Fail?
Yeah, 7.
7. We will not reconvene.
We're not reconvene. Let's hurry and get back there and get this over with.